You called for ending funding for Ukraine. And you also said that essentially Ukraine isn't democratic.
I would think elections are a fundamental aspect of a democracy. And if you're not having elections, you're not very democrat. However, I would say that my primary reason for opposing more money, we've sent over 100 billion, about 113 billion so far has been sent to Ukraine, so we don't have it. We're going to be $1.5 trillion short. We're almost $1 trillion short in just the last 3 months. We've accumulated trillions, so it might turn out to be like 1.7 trillion short this year. So it's not like we have a rainy day fund. It's like, oh, there's a surplus. We have all this extra money. Let's try to help, people defend against the Russian aggression. And, it is Russian aggression by all means. My sympathies are with Ukraine. And yet, my first obligation is to preserve the money we have and not threaten our security. And I think we're $33 trillion in debt now. We're getting to the point where debt is a greater threat to our national security than the war that's going on over there. And I also think that there won't be a peace as long as there's unlimited arms going into there. So as much as I sympathize with the Ukrainians, the country's getting destroyed by the war. The war's not good for anybody. Now, the Russians started it, but in order to get to an end, in order to get the two sides to talk about it, there has to be some limitations. They have to run up against some limitations that force them to negotiate. I mean, Zelensky's been saying he's not negotiating until every Russian troop is gone from Ukraine, including Crimea. And they've been in Crimea since 2014, and it used to be part of Russia at one point in time. So I think as long as those are the negotiating strategies, there won't be any peace. But in the process, Ukraine just keeps getting bombed to smithereens.
President Zelensky said this is about preventing World War III, that if Ukraine falls to Russia, then the Baltic states are next. Do you think that's likely?
There's another scenario where it could lead to World War III, and that is that at some point Russia becomes cornered, Russia becomes fearful, and reacts in an unpredictable way with nuclear weapons. That would certainly be a World War III, and that's a World War III we don't want. The spread of it regionally, I think, is unlikely because Russia is no longer the Soviet Union, no longer has a 1 million-man army, and they aren't doing that great, frankly, in Ukraine. I think the story of Ukraine is that Russia is a greatly weakened power with nuclear weapons. But when someone's weak and not doing very well on the traditional battlefield is a time in which they might lash out in an unpredictable way. So I think the likelihood of they're going to conquer Ukraine and next it's going to be the dominoes rolling. People used to talk about that, and it never really quite was, I think, sound theory even back in the 60s and 70s. But it certainly isn't sound or rational now to think that they're coming next for the rest of Europe.